I was starting to feel like dissatisfied in my life, and I couldn't figure out why I was feeling that way, because I felt like I had everything going for me. Great boyfriend and wonderful family. I had a 4.0 in school, I was doing really well. Great friends. Didn't have a reason to be unhappy or unfulfilled. And so it was starting to bug me because it was affecting my life, this feeling of feeling like lost or empty. It was this nagging thing, and I was starting to argue with Charlie a lot because I was unhappy and I didn't know why. I decided that I needed to break up with him and figure out what was going on with me. And there was a bunch of things that I did to try to figure, in hindsight I can look back and say, like, oh my gosh, like I felt like I tried everything to try to fill this void. I booked a trip to Europe, like for a month, to go with a friend, travel around, and I was thinking like, oh, people travel the world or whatever, and they figure things out about themselves like while they're out there. But I came back feeling that same void, and it was like even worse because I'm like, great, like I thought that would do something for me. I also, one night when I was I felt like really lost, like confused about why is this happening? It doesn't make sense. I shouldn't feel like this. I was driving home from work, and there was like a psychic. I stopped at the light, and it was like 9 p.m. and it was open. There was like a bright light open, and I went in and I was feeling like weird for some reason. I was like shaky, but I remember asking the psychic, like, oh, do your gifts come from God? Like I asked her that, where do you get your gifts? And she's like, oh, sweetheart. She was like, oh, they come from God, look. And she had a cross on the wall. She had like a Bible like sitting on a shelf. And she was like really trying to put me at ease. And now I know what the Bible says about, these things. But at the time I was just like, oh, good. Like that was good enough to me. To see a Bible there, never read a Bible, but it was sitting there, and to see the cross, and I was like, okay. So I like settled down a little bit. And she started reading me, and she really like read me exactly what I was going through. She like pinpointed it all. And I remember crying there and feeling like, oh my goodness, like she knows what's going on in my life, like. And she was saying to me how, you feel like you have the world in front of you, but your world is literally upside down and you don't know why. And she said the reason is because we all have these chakras in our bodies, and they're like part of our soul. And from what I remember, they're like these energy points in our body, and they each represent something different. And if they move in tune with each other, and if one of them is off, it throws off your whole being. And it'll affect you in a way that you don't understand. It's something deeper. And I was like, okay, like this makes sense. Like that's what's wrong with me. Like I just have to fix that. And she's like, and that can be fixed. And she's like, you will. She's like, you have to go to yoga and meditate and look within yourself, and you will find that inner peace and be able to get rid of that feeling that you're feeling of being empty in there. I immediately started going into yoga studios like the next couple days. I just feel like personally, because of what I went through, that it's much more than just exercise, because every pose that you're doing means something. And they were different prayers to God, to different gods. And what I was doing, mine was like a deeply spiritual yoga studio that I wound up at, but everything involved chants and things like that. And it was all Eastern religion, it was all opposed to God. So even when people say that they do yoga, like other Christians sometimes, as like a form of exercise, I always get this feeling like, oh, just go to the gym or take a walk, like don't do that. There's so many bad roots in that. Like, where does it come from? That led to a lot of Eastern religion. and a lot of like the power of now type stuff, you know, where you're attracting good things to yourself and all of that. It's a lot of books like that with this spiritual theme, all very spiritual, but the opposite of what's true. Eckhart Tolle, like that author, a lot of his stuff, The Alchemist, that was another one that like had a hold on me at one point. Don't sweat the small stuff, it's all small stuff, like that kind of stuff. The trees, how they're like spiritual as well, and the animals and insects, and how the world, you know, is like this, and it's a gift from God. It's beautiful, the world that God made, but it's worshiping like the things that He made without any knowledge of who God is truly. And they talk about God in these books, and they make you think that like you know who God is, but it's always underlying. It's always about striving. You're never resting, and now I know I have rest in God. I have peace. You're constantly striving for things. You're striving to be, you know, a better person, to be, to do these things, to be spiritual. You're like having to work really hard for it. And in Christ we find rest and peace, and He's all those things for us. So it's the opposite, and it's exhausting. And anybody who's in that line of thinking and spirituality and thinks they're really spiritual and is into all that stuff, they cannot deny that they're exhausted inside. They're tired of striving, because that's what it is. You're constantly working. I kept becoming disappointed, like more down, because I'm like, I think I find the answer, and then I'm still there, that emptiness, that it's just building. It's not even, I feel like it's closed, that hole that I felt, like, oh great, and then all of a sudden it's like twice the size that it was before. And then it was around like Easter time, I felt like I didn't really know. I knew why we celebrate Easter. I was like, oh, you know, Jesus rose from the dead, but I didn't know anything else. And I was curious, because I was like, oh, I read about every other religion and all these other things, and I was like, this thought in my mind, I'm like, let me go find a book about Jesus. And I didn't even think Bible, because the Bible was like off, like no one really reads the Bible. Like that's how my perspective was. I'm like, that's like for priests, like, you know, I'm not even gonna, it's very intimidating. I didn't even think of it. But I went to the library to find a book about Jesus, and I looked it up on the computer, like the Jesus section, and I remember I was going to that section, like towards it, and there was a cart where there was a bunch of books that people returned, I guess, and the librarians were gonna like put the books away, but it was just parked in the aisle randomly, and I don't know why. I just like swiped a book off of it. I wasn't like looking at the books, but I just picked up a book, and the book that I picked up was about Jesus. And I was like, wow, I was like kind of feeling like, wow, like I felt like overwhelmed, kind of like, this is cool, like this is what I was going to, and this is the book that I just have in my hand right now, something about Jesus. And I was like, okay, done. You know, I left and I took out that book, and it was all stories from the Gospels. You know, the parables were just like written, like separated. It wasn't all together. And it was starting to actually change me. Like my actions were changing, like things that I was doing, my perspectives, that hole that it was starting to like, it was weird. I felt like, whoa, like I feel like this is real, like this is true. And when I started reading the Bible, and then I was realizing that I was trying to be all these things and striving to be all these things, and I was trying to find myself by looking inward, you know, and I was realizing, how can I find myself without knowing the one that made me? And I had to look, instead of looking inside of myself, I had to know God, I had to know my Creator to know who I was. And so that's how I started to feel like, oh, like these answers, I'm getting all these answers to things. And I have a better understanding of life and why I'm here, and it just kept growing as I was reading the Bible. And then I was starting to feel like conviction of my sin. I always thought I was such a good person, really. Like, I really credited myself for being like a hard worker and, you know, a good person, a good daughter, a good girlfriend and good friend. And I thought I was like, you know, I was very self-righteous. But that was like crazy when my worldview started to crumble, actually, because it was built on sand. It was built on myself, and God was showing me that He's the perfect one. Like, you know, He's the one. It's not me. I can't be what I want to be without Him. You know, He does that in and through me. In Matthew it says, keep on asking and you will receive what you ask for. Keep on seeking and you will find. Keep on knocking and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, everyone who seeks finds, and to everyone who knocks the door will be open. It reminds me of like in that time when I was desperately seeking for something, didn't know what it was, how God used that and He revealed Himself to me. In hindsight, I can see how He was there every step of the way. You know, when I was going through it, I couldn't see that clearly. But now I know that I was seeking. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. I was confused, but the Lord is gracious and He revealed Himself to me. And during that time, miraculously, Charlie was having his own, God was working in his life. And so when we started talking again slowly, you know, now I was full and complete as a person. I could truly love him and I could be in a relationship that I wasn't going to suck everything out of him because I needed to fill something in me. And in the same way, he was a new man. You know, it was miraculous that God did that and brought us back together. And then shortly after that, we got engaged and got married, have our little boy, Lucas, and our second coming. So yeah, it was just amazing how God did that and how good He is to save us both that way. Hi, I'm Nicole, and this is my story of how God changed me and helped me find out who I really am. Do not defile yourselves by turning to mediums or to those who consult the spirits of the dead. I am the Lord your God.